What I'm going to talk to you about today really quickly, and this won't take too long, is just transitions and how to use them. And this is just real general work. It's not going to be anything that's really huge or mind-blowing or anything like that, but this is important stuff. The first thing that I want to say is when you're editing a film and you're putting it together, and you're doing your cuts and you're putting stuff together, one of the things that I think that a lot of students naturally do is they just try to start throwing transitions in everywhere because they're kind of cool, they're kind of fun, and they jazz it up a little bit. But honestly, transitions in my mind should be only used every once in a while, and most of the time a transition is used when you are changing scenes, changing location, changing time, you know, going backwards in time or going forwards in time. So let's say you have a conversation between two people and they're talking back and forth and you're cutting from one camera to the next, okay? That's great. No transitions needed, just hard cuts, done. But then the conversation ends, one person walks out of the room, let's say, and then the next shot is like 3 hours later, that person is now sitting at their desk in their room. That might be a good place for a transition. You see, because what that transition signifies is we've now gone forward in time. This now is not 2 seconds later, it's 2 hours later. And you can tell that from, you know, the time on the clock or the time of day. You know, maybe it's nighttime outside and it was daytime in the first scene. You know, there's a lot of clues there, but also the transition says to the viewer, we are now moving to something different, okay? And so I think the transitions can be very, very important. They can also do the opposite, and a good transition can show you when something is the same. So I'm taking a clue here from a student who was editing the Blue Horizon trailer here, and I really liked what she was doing. And she had set up, there's this one shot here, you guys should know this shot, okay? And so he's going along the side of the wave here, okay, like that. And then there's this shot from behind. Now, is it the same guy? Is it the exact same wave? We don't know. It doesn't even really matter. But these two do seem very nicely put together. And so we have this real nice shot here. So that works very well together. This might be a great place to do what we call a cross dissolve. And a cross dissolve is a simple transition that basically dissolves from one shot into a next evenly. So we're going to put a cross dissolve on these two clips, but something is going to happen. We're going to have problems doing so. And so what I did is, just to kind of lead you up to it, this clip here is the same as this clip. So what I did is I just cut it in half, and I have half of it at the end and half of it at the beginning, and then I drop this clip in the middle. And remember, when you drop a clip, you can push the right, you have the right arrow over, and it pushes everything over to the right. You can use that way. You can also cut clips in half using this tool right here, which is called the razor blade tool. Okay, it's a very handy tool to use, and works really well. So anyway, regardless of how I cut them in half, I've got this clip, and it's the same clip at the end, and then I put a clip in the middle. And what I want to do is I want to do a cross dissolve. All I need to do is go to the Effects tab up here, and let's close them all. It'll look like this to you, okay? And right under here is the video transitions. Just click on the triangle. You're going to get a whole bunch of folders, and inside each of those folders there's a bunch of different transitions. 9 times out of 10, you're going to use either cross dissolve or a fade in, fade out. Most of these others are cheesy, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. We'll do the cross dissolve, and then I'll replace that cross dissolve with some of the other transitions, and we'll see what you think. So anyway, so I've got the cross dissolve here. And if I'm going to drag that, all I got to do to get this done is I just drag this right down onto the timeline here. But if you look really carefully, you can see that the cross dissolve is only going on one of the clips. It's not going on both. And you can kind of see if I move it over too far, it does an X. Okay? The reason for that is that when you're doing a transition, you have to have extra frames at the beginning and the ending of your clips. So if I'm looking at these two clips here, I have to have extra frames at the end of the first clip, and I have to have extra frames at the beginning of the second clip. And if I go and double click, we can see this here. I do have extra frames on the end of this first clip, but if I double click on this one, I do not have extra frames at the beginning of this clip. So I need to cut out some frames. This is going to affect my timing. But if I want to use a cross dissolve or almost any transition, I have got to have that extra frameage. That's a new word, just made it up. It works kind of like this. Think of it this way. If you're going to do a transition, the two clips have to overlap. So essentially what has to happen, if I drag this up into a new track here, okay, is this clip has to move a little bit that way. And now there's an overlap between the two clips where you can do transitions. I remember working in video editing software back in the 90s. That was the way you had to do transitions, is you had to have the two tracks, one on A track, one on B track, and you had to fade between them that way. Now it's a lot easier. We can just do it with one track. But I'm just trying to show you visually how it works. They have to be overlapping. When you add the transition, Final Cut Pro does the overlap for you, but it can only do that if the clip has additional frames. So if I double click up here, you can see the in and the outs of this clip. Okay, you can see that they're right at the end. So if I want to do, let's say, a nice half of a second dissolve for about a half a second, that's pretty fast, but I think in this case it'll look good. How many frames is in a half a second? Does anybody remember? I haven't really quizzed you on this too much, but you might have picked it up. Is that? How many frames in, how many frames in 1 second? Does anybody remember? We talked about it briefly. 300? No. But you're close. You're not in this class.
More or less.
Actually, divide it by 10. 30. 30 frames per second in video. Now, there's different standards for frames per second depending upon what you're doing. If it's a Hollywood movie, it's usually shot at 24 frames per second. Television these days is usually shot at 30 or 60, depending upon the high-def signal and whether it's interlaced or not. We'll talk about that later. The footage that you got here for this trailer is at 30 frames per second. So half of a second would be 15. So what I need to do is I need to basically shorten this clip by 15 frames in the beginning so that I can do a transition. There's two ways to do it. I'll show you both. So the first way that you can do it is just go here, and I can move, just make sure I've double-clicked the right one. So there it is. Make sure that I move, and then you can see up at the top of the viewer here, let's make this a little bigger. You can see right here, I've got a time code. See that? That's telling me that I'm now 15 frames in. And if you look at it really carefully, you'll notice it goes 00, colon, 00, colon, 00, semicolon, 15. So whatever's after the semicolon is frames. If it's here, it's seconds. If it's here, it's minutes. And then here, it's hours. So hours, minutes, seconds, frames. So the frames is always after a semicolon. So I don't even have to scrub through the timeline. If I just want to jump to there, I can just go into highlight, just type semicolon 15. Now it jumps straight to 15 frames. Now I'm going to hit my in button right here on the viewer and watch what happens down here on the timeline. Boom. See how it got shorter? Did you see it get shorter there? Okay, let's do that again. Watch the clip here as I hit this button right there. See, mark my in. Boom. I'm modifying the in point of that clip. But now we've got a big problem, don't we? it's no longer touching. In order for you to add a transition properly, the clips must be touching each other. Let me say that again. In order to add a transition properly, the clips must be touching each other. So I'm going to make sure that snapping is on, and I can see over here that it is. And now I'm just going to move the clip until I get those little arrows, and now it's snapped to this one. Okay? Doesn't look any different right now, but it will. Now when I add the cross dissolve, and I drag it down here, you can see how the cross dissolve now is going on both clips. You see that? And when I add it, there we go. If it only has 7 frames to work with, it will force it to use a cross dissolve that's only 7 frames long. So in this case, it only had 15 frames to work with, so it matches that to the shortest distance. If you have more than 15 frames or more than 30 frames, it will default to 1 second, which is a 30 frame dissolve. So let's just take a look at how this looks, see what we did here. I think that looks pretty good. Now, notice I'm doing something wrong, though. This is rather interesting. Remember my instructions to you about shooting? What rule am I breaking by editing these 2 clips together? The 180 rule. Exactly. Look at the motion on the screen. I didn't even think about this when I did this demo first period. First he's going this way, from left to right. Now he's going from right to left. Now it makes sense to us visually because we understand we flipped, so your brain kind of figures it out. But technically, that's not such a great thing to do. He should be moving left to right again. But then, if you do that, then it actually looks like it's a totally different shot and a different wave and a different person, because now in our brains we know we're going backwards. So I could fix this, but it might actually make things worse. I think about it a little bit more. I think I'm just going to keep it the way it is, but I could flip this image so he was moving left to right. But then I might have problems. So I don't know. This would be one of those ones where maybe the best thing to do would be back off and not do this edit the way I'm trying to do it right now, because it breaks that 180-degree rule. What I need is another shot from the front or from behind so that I'm moving my camera sequentially around the subject. I don't have that, so now do I care? Probably not. I'm going to leave it anyway. Plus, I'm just doing a demo for you guys about this, but that's a tough one. Okay, so now let's move to the second dissolve. So we did 1 dissolve coming into the clip, right? Final Cut Pro is going to be difficult. So we have to move to our second dissolve because we're going to dissolve out of this shot and back to the second half of our first shot. Now, did I have any frames extra at the end of this middle clip? No. So I've now got to go in and I have got to subtract some frames from the end. And if you look down here, you can see I've already got a gap here. I've already got a gap. And if I subtract 15 more frames, I'm going to have a bigger gap. So essentially, I've had to shorten this clip by almost a full second to do these transitions. So it might be something where you get into it and realize, you know what, this is not possible with the clips that I've got because it'll change your timing too much. And maybe it won't. Maybe your timing will be perfect with it. You might have to fiddle with the timing a little bit. You know, sometimes you're going to have to figure it out. Okay, so the first way of changing the timing of a clip was to double click it, get it up in the viewer, and change your ins and outs. The second way that you can alter a clip's timing is, you don't even have to double click it, is to go down here on the timeline, and as you get close to the edge of a clip, notice that you get these double lined arrows. This is telling you that you're going to do a rolling edit. I've already showed you this before. But what's also cool is it will tell you exactly how much you're shortening the clip by. So if I click and drag, this is where snapping can be a real pain. So I'm going to turn snapping off, hit the N key, turn snapping off. There we go. So now I'm just going to go until it's minus 15 frames. Boom. Now I've shortened my clip enough that I can go back and have it done. Now before I drag this clip back over to the left, I need to turn snapping back on by hitting the N key so that when I bring it over, they snap together and we know that they're touching. If you've got a little space in there, not only will the transition not work, but you also have a black frame that will flash in, which is very annoying. So here we go. Cross dissolve, drag it down. It's going to force itself into a 15 frame cross dissolve. Let's look at our final effort. That works pretty nice with the music. Not too shabby. Now, just to give you another little lesson here, if I look at this transition here and where the music is going, this clip ends a little late in my opinion. It should end a little earlier. Just listen. Should end right about there, probably, is where the new clip should come in. So I have a problem. I can just chop the end off of this clip, but I think that would look rather awkward. Why do I think that would look rather awkward? Because I love the fins at the end here. I think they're really cool. So what I really want to do is chop a little bit off of the beginning. So what I'm going to do here is this, and it's not hard at all. Ready? I'm going to keep my playhead here on the timeline right where I want that transition to be. Click on the transition, or yeah, where I want the end of the clip to be. I'm going to click on this transition. I'm going to delete it. Now I'm just going to go here and do a big rolling edit, bring that out so that I've got a lot of room here. I'm going to bring this forward until it snaps to the playhead. Now I know that the end is about where I want to be. Bring this forward just a little bit. Come on now. There. Bring it forward just a little bit without bringing it all the way. And now I'm going to watch it just to make sure that the timing is about right. Snapping back on. I like it. Now, did you see that little black flash? See that flash of black? Okay. I knew that this was in this clip. Usually when that happens, it means you didn't have snapping on, and when you were editing, these two clips are not touching. However, in this case, that's not what's happening. What's actually happening is the footage that we received actually has a black frame at the end of it. Oops. If I go one frame over by hitting the left cursor arrow, I'm good. So what I'm going to do, one frame like that's not going to make much of a difference. So I'm going to reset my out right on that frame, which shortens the clip on the timeline, which now means that there's still a black frame there because now my two clips are not touching. So I'm going to pull this out and then snap it back in. Now, as I play it, there should be no black frame. Make the window bigger and let's just check it out. Perfect. So now I'm ready to add my cross dissolve back in. I finagled my editing a little bit. It looks a lot better. So I'm going to go back in here, snapping still on, and I'm going to do a rolling edit. I'm going to bring this clip back until it snaps to the second clip. So this is our third clip. And now I'm going to add this cross dissolve back in, and let's watch our final product. Good. I think the timing could probably be worked on a little bit. It's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 frames off, just a touch. I'd probably move all 3 of them together, all 4 of them together until I found it. But you get the idea. Now, I just want to show you a couple of the other transitions just so that you have a sense of what they might do. So I'm going to delete my cross dissolves here, and I'm going to add a fade in, fade out. Pretty simple. Fade in, fade out. Fades to black momentarily. Not going to be as good for this as I think. What does that do? How does it feel different than the cross dissolve? Let's watch it again. What does it communicate differently? Because I think it's as important to discuss really quickly here. Does it feel like it's the same shot anymore? I think the fade to black separates them. Makes it really feel like they're two different actions now. Whereas with the cross dissolve, we were kind of saying that's the same guy, the same board, the same wave. Whether it was or not, it doesn't matter. That's what we were kind of saying. By putting the fade in, fade out, now you're kind of saying this is a different shot, maybe even a different guy, different board, different wave. Does that make sense to everybody? So the transitions that you choose, you want to be very careful with them. Ripple dissolves are horrendous, but I'm just going to show them to you anyway. Now, oh, this is good, this is good. Notice what just happened with these. See the little red bars that came up above them? That means that this transition cannot be played without having to render it. Let's try playing it and see what happens. Okay, unrendered. What I need to do is I need to highlight it, and I hit Command R, or I can go to the sequence and render my selection. It's going to write the video to the scratch disk so that we can see what it does. And it's really ugly. Yes, even though it looks like water, it's still ugly. Don't do those. I don't like them. Dither dissolves, but I'll let you play with them. Additive dissolves are kind of cool, though. I like additive dissolves. Show you what that looks like. Additive dissolve adds the colors, so what you do is they get brighter. Sometimes even adding into a pure white. See that? How it added? It's kind of neat. So that could be kind of cool.
Work better in like a desert scene or something. Like
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's maybe not perfect here, but I could see places where it would work really well. Let's show you some others here. Oh, page peel. I hate page peel, but everybody seems to love it. There's page peel. Ooh. Okay, delete. Ooh, the iris ones. These are even worse. Yeah, pretty bad. Now, let me just say, you can control transitions by double-clicking on them. We could actually make this maybe a little better. I double-clicked on it, and you'll see up here I have some options. One of the things that I can do is I can add a border. Well, the border's not going to be so good. Let's move into the middle of transition here. See that? Border's pretty hideous. But if I check the Feather Edges button, it adds, the border doesn't become black anymore, it becomes like faded. So see that? Now it's not quite as bad, is it? I mean, it's still not great, but it's not as bad. Let's just try, ooh, a diamond iris. These are just as bad. Yeah, pretty bad. There was a box slide. Box slide could be cool if you played with it, maybe. Okay, so the box slide is kind of cool. You can change the direction. So in this case, I might want it to go from right first, because then it will bring in our person. See? So now the person's in there first. There's a lot of things that you can, that you should take into account when doing transitions. They're powerful things. Oh, this one needs to be rendered. Rendering transitions does not take long. Woohoo! All right, you get the idea. For almost everything you're going to possibly want to do, your fade in, fade outs, your cross dissolves, anything that's in this dissolve folder is most likely going to be what you want to do. Okay, that's most likely going to be what you want to do. But to be honest with you, in a 1 minute's worth of video, really, 2, maybe 3 or 4 transitions total. Really, I mean, it's a trailer, so you're actually allowed maybe a little bit more than you might be if you were actually editing, say, a scene, cutting a scene together for a movie, because trailers have a tendency to have some extra special dissolves or fade in, fade outs for effect or something like that. But that being said, 2, 3 tops. Okay? Question.
When you change the time frame with the transition in, does it like shorten or clip
Yeah.
the timing?
Yeah, the timing can get really messed up. Yep. So as you shorten those clips, you're going to have to be careful of that. It might even get to the point where you're standing there and you're going through the process and you realize, you know what, my timing is more important than the dissolve. And just forget it. I'm going to leave it as a hard cut, not worry about it, because the timing is usually more important than the dissolve. Okay? So be smart about this. Be creative. Don't get so worked up about transitions that you forget that you're telling a story. And the story is not dissolves. The story is about surfing. And so, in this case, or in your other movies that you're going to make for this class, don't get all freaked out about the special effects and the things you can do with these computers at the expense of your story.